Youth.
Hi, Bricks.
What
So is
have
it
you
just a
been doing today?
conversation with us two? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Right. And what we're talking about live venues.
Well, that and anything else under the sun that you fancy.
Okay. Okay. I've got a new song for you, actually.
Oh, really? What's it called?
At the moment, it's called Roadkill. Yeah. But yeah, I think you'll like it. It's very different. It's very chilled out. It's quite dream housey, but with an indie flavor.
Oh, I cannot. Will you send it to me today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's very, very different from what we've been doing with all the loud guitars, but I can hear it working somehow.
Oh, I'm so excited. Well,
yeah, so that's good. What have you been up to?
oh, today not much, just oh, yeah, I'm doing some I do some stuff for the Fragrance Foundation where I'm on the judging panel of the Jasmine Awards, which is the awards about well, it's part of the award system for the Fragrance Foundation, which is like the Oscars of scent. But the Jasmines are specifically the art of journalism of writing about scent. So I have about
Ooh.
60 or 70 articles to read by journalists about the launches of scent this year. So I've been doing that.
Have you read Purple?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, scent is my specialist subject. It's my
Wow.
secret geeky nerdy thing. You
Wow.
probably didn't know that about me, but hopefully I smell good to you.
Talked about it. But I remember going to a lecture of Brian Eno's once, and he used, he said in his spare time he got into making perfumes and scents, and he juxtaposed the grease of a motorcycle chain with some patchouli flower, things like that, and he said it was very similar to the process of making records, which is also very similar to the process of sort of painting, or all those arts of a similar sort of combination of and things that make it work. And it was fascinating, actually. It was really great. So that'll be an interesting thing for you. Yeah.
Well, scent is such a powerful thing because it guides you in a way that you're not even aware of. It's so subliminal, and it can really slam you the same way that music can into like a sense memory to take you back in time to a place or a feeling, like the first time you had sex or this or that. It's such a powerful thing. And you know what, Youth? I have a fantasy. I really have a fantasy of creating a scent for every song on an album and having a scratch and sniff, so that each song could have a scent that went with it, so that you could listen to the music and have the evocation of the scent at the same time. But I haven't yet quite gotten there, and of course I haven't talked to you about doing that, but it's in my mind. Maybe not this album.
They say attraction is 80% scent.
Absolutely. For sure. It's the pheromones. It's how animals are guided to breed, and you can tell so much about people even without knowing by their scent, it's really interesting. Anyway, let's talk about independent venues, because that's kind of the root of our conversation.
Yeah.
So do you talk to me about, when was the last time you played live?
It would have been 2019. Yeah. When we did the North American tour with Killing Joke, supporting tour, arena tour, 3 months. But that wasn't. Those weren't independent venues. Well, they might have been, but they were arenas. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, big. Yeah.
That was quite soul destroying on many levels. Actually, those arenas are brutal.
Brutal,
but brutal in that there's absolutely no smoking, anywhere. And you're in some, basketball changing room as a dressing room. And everyone looks, when you go into the basement of an arena, it looks the same as every other arena you've ever been on. It's Groundhog Day. And it's just like being in an underground tube station. It's just soul destroying. I spent most of the days running around cities. I mean, I had a great time, and I loved. I spent a lot of time on our tour bus where I had a record player and I could smoke. It's great, but what I missed about touring when we did that tour of smaller venues, which we've done a fair amount of, is hanging out, meeting people, fans coming by early on for the sound check, hanging out outside the venue, having a smoke, sharing a smoke with someone, or talking to the people who work in the venue about the history of the venue. Those things are you go to a small or even a big club in New Orleans, and they'll tell you which maestros played there. All that is the magic of touring, the sort of sawdust of tour in the atmosphere. You don't get that in an arena. It's like they're all like O2. They're just horrible. I don't know why anyone could have built them. Yeah.
It's also soulless. And the other thing about arenas, which you don't really think about, is the lighting. And certainly the lighting in the dressing room, it's cold, horrible, fluorescent. Yeah. And that is also psychologically. So it's not where you want to spend a lot of time. So the tour bus would seem like a really good option, or a nearby restaurant,
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. And there's no windows, anywhere.
No. Cinder block.
Yeah, they're like nuclear fallout shelters or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Nevertheless, you see a great band, they can totally change in an arena, and you can have a great time. But I try and avoid them if I can, And I think before that, I did a few other gigs that year. At Christmas, the year before, 2019, I did a show with Andrew Weatherall and Nina Walsh, and as a solo show, which where I was singing some electronic folk music I've been writing that's coming out in about 6 months, and Andrew read an extract from his Acid House story poem, and that was at the Social in Oxford Circus. You must know that place.
Yeah.
And that's just a small underground little bar club, but great vibe, legendary being had there, and that was a really good example of an independent venue, and a great, what a great magical night that could be. I had Violetta with us, and Frank Alba, who's a French guitar player, and Nina doing the electronics, Andrew's side partner in the studio for decades and decades. And it was, it was a wonderful little moment. And it was great for me because I'm quite shy when I'm performing. That's why I'm a producer, I think. I like being in the shadows around the spotlight, not so much in the spotlight. So to sort of debut my poetic folk stuff in a very intimate venue with people I really, really respected, like Weatherall, who encouraged me to do it. That was a very nice way of breaking the shell of that, coming out of that shell into the spotlight of it. And I'm looking forward to doing more encouragement. And I think, those little venues are the hotbeds of where artists develop, aren't they? In whether it's Nashville or South London or Camden Town, that will, in their early 20s, play hundreds of gigs with different bands and their own bands and stuff, and learn their art. They learn how to do it, and that will be a fervent seedbed for them to come through and become great artists. And without that, it's a crazy thing that if you think about the consequences of art, the supply chain of the sound systems, the speakers in the boxes, the leads, the techs, the vast army of people involved to put a show on the road and get it going, and DJs and other, you take that carpet away from under their feet. I mean, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of money. Especially in Britain, where I think we're world class at doing that with not just with the artists, but with the teams and crews that go out and do the sound. And on the tour, half of their core team were British. There was a British guy doing the sound. We're world beaters, and yet what's a tragedy is the government have just thrown the whole thing, one of our last remaining big industries, under the bus for Brexit and for COVID, because they're not giving hardly any support to the artists or the techs who do those jobs, who are self-employed, often, work very sporadically at the best of times. So it's a tragedy unfolding in front of our eyes. And I don't know what the solution is, really. I suppose the way New Zealand, Australia have modelled it has been good, with the, making sure everyone stays in a hotel for 2 weeks when they come into the country. I mean, they say they're bringing that. As reluctant as I am to think that's a good idea, it does seem to work, and I don't know. We have to try some other ways of combating the pandemic. But I mean, politically, the government could be putting out a lot more money and help to those that need it.
Well, there's loads of people raising the flag for that and pushing forward, and hopefully they'll listen and they'll get it, and something will change, and it will all be okay. Because, I mean, for me, when I was first in the fall, I cut my teeth in obviously independent venues and in the kind of university and polytechnic scene, scene as well. But last year, 2020, I played 2 shows in January before everything got fucked up. And the first show I played was January a year ago at the 100 Club, which is an incredible independent venue with such history. And so we played it with the Extricated, and it was it's a weird thing because it's actually connected me to you. You don't know this, but the 100 Club has played a massive role in a lot of things in my life. They fucking love them. I love Jeff. I love them. But Nadine Shaw was at that show, and it was at that show where she said to me, "You need a decent manager. You need a decent manager." And then she introduced me to Roz, who then put you and I together to write this album, which is coming out this year. And if it weren't for that show at the 100 Club and independent venue, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny how our fate and destiny hangs on the thread of a gig sometimes, but I believe that. I believe that those little things can alter the entire course of the next year or two. Sometimes it's strange, but it's a beautiful thing. I love the 100 Club as well. It's very I've seen some incredible gigs there. I remember seeing Bo Diddley there.
Wow.
In the early 80s, And the gig, sadly, the gig was about a third full, but it was everyone who was there. Everyone there was a musician. It was amazing, and I never saw the Pistols there, but I mean they've had some incredible shows there that I've enjoyed and great nights, and that's a good last one to go out on before the pandemic.
I
Yeah.
know. And then I did another one the next week, but it was one of those festivals at Butlins. I think it was called Rockaway Beach, which
Oh
was
yeah. Mm.
so fun. I love them. It's surreal, those ones. They're like,
Very true, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like what's that movie with Jim Carrey where he's like living in this false town? What was that
Yeah.
movie? The Truman Show. Those Butlins ones are surreal. It's like
Yeah.
trippy, but what I love about them is that everybody's there for the weekend, and it's a kind of a contained festival, so it's not like filthy dirty, and you can mingle with everybody, and everybody there is just of one mind, all about the music, and you get to meet so many people, and I just love that too. But I want about back to independent venues, not that we're going to keep on going over and over, but I want to know what your favorite one is. I'm going to tell you mine. Well, I love the 100 Club, but I also love the Trades Club at Hebden Bridge. Have you ever
Yeah.
played that one?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It
Yeah, I love
is.
it. And they got piano backstage, even better, with
Yeah.
this little terrace, lovely.
Yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah. And the
great.
terrace that looks, yeah, and they treat you so well, and they're just so kind and warm. But the venue itself, because it's like an old theater, I guess it's an old sort of working men's club or something, but it's like an old theater, and it's like wooden, and the sound is great there, and the audience, there's some energy that's contained in the place. And of course, Hebden Bridge itself is like fairyland, magical land. There's something coming up from the earth there. I don't know. Do you feel it as well? I just every time I go there, I'm like, yes,
Yeah, it's a magical village. It is. It's
yeah,
beautiful. I think it's one of the village of the happiness quota in the country or something. As
yeah,
Hebden. There's quite
yeah,
a few heads there, and it's surrounded by the most stunning countryside. Yeah, that's a wonderful venue, and you're right. I agree. It's run very well, and it's very human. Yeah, I mean, some of my favorites. Ones in America, really. I remember the old Whiskey A Go Go in LA. You must have known.
oh yeah, yeah. I played that. That was a high point of my life, playing that one.
Yeah, and that had a lot of wood, didn't it? Wooden building, I think. And I remember we played a sort of 4 or 5 night run there just before it shut down in the early '80s, and that was one of the best. It was an amazing experience. And then there's clubs in New Orleans that I've played at. I can't remember the name. That just had the most incredible vibe. But if I'm
What
thinking
about
about
what about
Europe and
nine?
the
What about
UK,
Yuffie? What about 930 Club in Washington D.C.? Did you ever play there? That punk club,
what's it called?
930, like 930,
It,
Washington
it
D.C.
sounds, yeah, it
It was
sounds,
scummy. It was just disgusting, but it was
sounds familiar.
unbelievable vibe. Oh my God. I think Pussy Galore supported us, or
Yeah.
Bikini Kill, or one of those great
Yeah.
girl bands. Really good.
I first went to America in '79 with Killing Joke, and we were playing places like the Stone Pony in Jersey, and but we were also playing Hurrahs um, and great places in New York at that time.
And
Um,
Maxwell's Kansas City.
Maxwell's Kansas City, yeah. We never did
Yeah.
CBGBs or anything like
No,
that.
I didn't either.
But for Europe, I think it's got to be places like in Amsterdam, the Milky Way, Paradiso. They're amazing, those clubs.
I got electrocuted at the Paradiso on stage.
Wow,
Like
that's
literally, like it was
wow.
so bad. Something wasn't earthed, and like
Yeah,
my mic didn't have a pop shield, and the electricity went from like my guitar to my mic to my mouth. Like you could see this arc, and it
yeah.
blew me
There's a
back.
heavy vibe there. The
Yeah.
backstage was done in the basement. I think that had been a Gestapo HQ during the war or something. There was some dark vibes in there.
Really,
Nevertheless,
really, really dark. Nevertheless, it was
yeah, but
always
look,
a
great
good
people
show.
around.
Yeah.
Obviously, the people who run the place is very good. It is very important to the venue. The venue takes on their vibe. So, I think there was a club we played in Chelmsford or something recently that was great. The owner was fantastic. It was in a little church, or was it in Norfolk or somewhere like that? That was great. The owner was really, really helpful, really great. London, right? Okay, what are the clubs I love in London these days? I still quite
Lexington.
like, yeah, I still quite like the Dublin Castle and some of those pub venues. The Windmill, of course, in Brixton, which is more my manor, is a fantastic venue, and I've seen incredible gigs there. Lewisham Arms, and
The Oslo. Have you been to Oslo? That's good. Cafe
yeah.
Oto. That's good.
Oh yeah, that's a great gig. I saw the Sunrise Orchestra without Sun Ra, of course, there a few years ago on Mushrooms, and that was wonderful because it had that. It's got that kind of paved terrace outside. They've just got tables and chairs. You can just chill out, and you're like, wow, it got a bit too intense. I'll just go and sit out there, and you could still hear the music coming through the doors. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, the sort of smoking ban in clubs put me off going to clubs a lot in the 2000s. But of course, I was still touring and DJing a lot, and most venues are fairly liberal about me having a smoke and skinning up some weed in the venue backstage these days. But some venues can be very officious about it, and that can be a drag. But
My issue is every time I go to a club, right, I can feel the energy because I'm like an energy worker, right?
uh,
I'm very sort of like, witchy about it. So I always bring my Palo Santo to clean the energy and to make the canvas clean because historically in clubs and bars, it's where people go to drown their sorrows, and there's lots of like emotions stained into
oh
the
yeah,
walls and all kinds of spiritual elements of stuff going on there. So there's lots of heavy energy, certainly in the 30s. But nowadays, I carry the Palo Santo, which I burn and clean the
yeah.
whole thing, and they lose their mind when I'm rocking around with this burning thing before the show, cleaning the stage, cleaning everything. And I'm sorry, I'm like, I am not playing until I've cleaned and blessed this place, and so that we so that we can bring down the magic safely. But you know that about me because I do that in the studio. But I can imagine them going nuts about the smoking because they hate the Palo Santo. It's fire
We
hazard,
used
but it's
to
not.
we used to go a bit further than that with Killing Joe, where we take a fire breather with us on tour in the
What's
early
that? What
days.
do you mean a fire breather? Like a person on stage that like spat like a dragon head? What?
Blue fire. So we had this guy called Dave the Wizard who lived on Far Squat, who was going out with Dweena at the time, who was the chief top white witch in the UK, still is, I think, and she ended up marrying Barry Gibb, I think, or one of the Bee Gees. And she's been a great benefactor to the pagan community ever since. But at the time, she was living with Wizard. Wizard was crazy. He never wore shoes, and he had a 7-pointed star tattooed on his face, and he had a wild dog called Heldon, and about 18 wild cats. And he lived in a completely feral existence at the top of the block we lived in Elgin Crescent, which is one of the most expensive real estate roads in London now. But we had this mansion block we squatted, and we had the basement. And there were about 4 other floors, and we took him on tour, and we'd be in a small club, and he would draw a circle out on the dance floor, a 7-point circle in chalk, and then we'd do a ritual blessing, which before we go on stage, we do a little circle, and I'll do a blessing, and Jazz will chip in. But those days we do it with Wizard, and then we'd make the whole gig a ceremony basically, and he'd blow fire. Very cleansing. Whatever nefarious vibes were hanging around soon got out of there. But of course, we couldn't get away with that today with the health and safety issues. But in those days, in the early 80s, we never had a problem. It was fantastic. People loved it. But yeah, I suppose, you know, that's good and bad, isn't it? That, like in New Orleans, they'd have busts of these old voodoo blues guys, and you'd sort of pat the head for luck and stuff like that. And they, yeah, the walls, the stone has a memory, doesn't it? It's all the music and good times seep into the fiber and fabric of the place. And maybe a few bad ones when you bring out your Palo Santo and just chase them away. But you know, those are what makes great venues. But those venues ever rarely stay, you know, intact. Excellent was amazing in Liverpool. You must have played that in the early 40s. Eric's in Liverpool.
Oh no, I don't think I ever played Eric's. It was so legendary. And I always wanted to, but I never did, I don't think. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, it was next door to the Canals where the Beatles were, which is amazing.
That's right.
It had the same vibe. And way before Killing Joke, when I was still 16 or something, was called The Rage, and we had a 2-3 week residency there. And I ended up living in Budgie's squat with our manager and various other people in the band who were squatting in other people's squats for those few weeks, and everybody was very friendly. I fell in love with Liverpool from that stint, actually. But that was an amazing atmosphere. You'd have 3 a week at least, and they do matinees. I love the matinees at the weekends. We do them with Killing Joke, where you do an afternoon show like 4 or 5 o'clock, and then they kick everyone out at 7 and let another load in and do an evening show. And the afternoon show would be non-alcoholic, no alcohol, so kids could get in. And they were always the better shows. We love doing that. You never see that anymore, very rarely.
No. I you know, a couple of years ago when I was on tour with the Extricated, we had a lot of families that follow us, like moms and dads, like, you know, dads that were Fall fans, moms that watched me on Gawk's Fashion Fix or whatever, would come together with their teenage kids to the shows. And we call them the Extricated families. And it's like a whole kind of network of fans. And sometimes we would do these shows, and like there was this one kid called Dylan who was about like 15 and couldn't get into the venues. So I used to try and smuggle him in as like, you know, my godson or whatever. But we realized it was really important to do all ages shows, and I'm all about that. And when this gets over and when we can go back on the road, I absolutely want to do all ages shows. Bring them in and bring them young.
We when we started, when we started taking off, we'd have about 25 kids follow us hitchhiking from gig to gig, and they'd try and find somewhere to stay after the gig. We'd often put them up in our bedsit or hotel bedrooms, and you'd have about 5 kids on the floor. And some of the kids are still friends of mine, weird. And that was an amazing experience. And I'm sure that still happens with younger bands, well, you know, before the pandemic. But it was such a great camaraderie of people like running away with the circus or something. It was a great freedom to it, and the venues became very special places, people for their rites of passage. Even the Cavern and Eric's, those places aren't there now. It's hard for clubs to keep it going, even without the pandemic. I was impressed that we played this club. We did a 2-night residency in this really cool bar. I think it's called the Broken Bottle or something. And this was quite recently, and their work ethic, because every time we played there in the afternoon, the venue would have a craft fair in the venue in the morning, early afternoon. Then everyone would get out. We'd be given an hour to do a sound check. Then they'd have some like country and western line dancing go on. The place would be full again with these couples doing country and western dancing with a little country and western band playing in front of our gear. That would go on till like 8, and then we do a set. So that would go on till 7 or something. They'd kick everyone out. Then they'd open our sets, and we do 2 sets a night as well. So we do one at 7, and then another one at 10 or something. And I thought, my God, the people who are running that place were like formidable, you know, and how they really managed to make that space work. You know, they'd have 4 gigs on in one day. Very clever. And you never see that happening in the UK. Sometimes in Europe, I've seen that.
Well, I've seen it in terms of when the last couple times we've been on tour, we played some small places. I remember playing one in Oxford, which I can't even remember what the name of,
yeah,
but it was fucking dump. It was horrendous, and you had to go like down the stairs into this basement, and there wasn't even a dressing room. It was like some curtain behind a bar. I mean, it's just really like, it was one of those really tough ones. But then like we had a curfew of like 11 o'clock, and they were like, get all your gear out. So we're like lugging the gear up the stairs while all these punters from Oxford are coming down, getting ready to start an all-night disco. So there's a lot of like turnover of bands getting out of the venue, and then they turn it into like massive discos, you know. So
that happens.
Yeah.
So we talk about the worst venues we've played now. How would maybe answer that? Yeah, like that reminded me. I remember when we were playing in the early days of Killing Joke in the Midwest and going into the southern states of America. We'd actually be playing clubs where you'd have the chicken wire in front of the stage before they'd be throwing beer balls, like the Blues Brothers or something.
Oh God!
And we had riots and stuff. I couldn't believe it. In Germany as well, they'd be like, crazy.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I mean, I'm afraid that I'm going to say something controversial here, but there is a club on the circuit in the UK which possibly rank as my worst, which is the New Adelphi in Hull. Have you ever played that one? Okay, so let me just say, on the first time, so it was like we were on tour with the Extricated, and I was like, great, we're going to Hull, New Adelphi, it's famous. And Jason Brown turned to me and he said, Brix, manage your expectations. And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he said, I'm just saying. Oh my God. It was like, oh my God, it was covered in black mold. There were so many bad spirits there. I had to sage the fuck out of it. The dressing room, I mean, it was so bad that it will never leave my mind. But the worst thing for me was we walked into it in the afternoon, and there were 3 massive pickle jars on the bar. And in one jar was the face of Tom York. And in another jar was the face of Jarvis Cocker. And in the third jar was the face of Marky Smith, my dead ex-husband. I walked in there, and that was greeting me. And he had only just passed right before. And I was so horrified to see his face in this jar after he had passed. And I thought, how can you people not be empathetic enough to know that I once loved this man. I was married to him. He was my fucking soulmate. How can you leave the jar of my dead ex-husband on the fucking thing? So I was already put off. Now, to quantify
good thing you had your stage.
I did.
Sounds quite good, actually.
But let me tell you the story. So now, as rough and as grim as this club is, literally the 2 times the Extricated have played there, which is when I played there, were 2 of the best gigs we ever played. We blew the roof off it. The audience was the most incredible audience. So
Yeah.
it was like, for us, it was uncomfortable in terms of the amenities, right? But in terms of
Yeah.
the music was dripping off the walls and it was spectacular energy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you never know.
You never know. No, and that's right. And we used to think, oh, we tell agents and promoters and say, get us gigs in seaside towns, it'd be more fun.
Yeah.
And then we did these towns. We realised that British seaside towns in winter can be incredibly depressing and bleak and scary places.
and freezing to your bones. They're never warm inside these places. So you have like duvets and blankets and everything around you, and you're just like shaking with the bones, cold damp seaside. The good thing about seaside is fish and chips, and then rock, which I like. I like sucking a bit of rock. Yeah.
But it's interesting how people say, "Oh, it'll never go back to the way it was." Who knows? It must do. The worrying thing about people not being able to, I really feel for the kid. I've got kids in their early 20s. They can't go out. The venues, those little independent venues are where people meet and have their rites of passage and find out who they are, and find their tribe and their community. Without that, they're just left with Tinder and Facebook, and it's. I think it's going to have a big. It's tough for them, for their mental health, and they're growing. I think it's harder for them than it is for the older ones, even though they're not as vulnerable to the death of the COVID. But they've been put into solitary confinement, basically, haven't they? I mean.
A year of their freedom or 2 years of their freedom, and the way finding themselves, the really important time of all kinds of stuff has been robbed for them. But I believe that kids are really resilient, and I also believe that when this is over, and it will be, that things can possibly change for the better, and that we are going to be so appreciative of everything in a way that we weren't before. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to kiss the ground of the new Adelphi if I ever get to play there again, because I will be thankful. And I think we're all going to celebrate like fuck when this is over, and that it's going to be hopefully a better, more empathetic world. And hopefully these venues are going to last and stand, and the government's going to get its shit together and realize how important music is to our lifeblood as human beings, to our mental health, and save us, And I think these kids are going to be, as hard as it is for them now and as robbing as it is from them for all of us, I think they're resilient, and I think we need to all look on the positive and look towards the future. Just get through what we have to now and fucking celebrate when we're done. It's the new Roaring 20s. I'm telling you, it's coming. We're going to be okay.
Here. Well done. Well said, Briggs.
Yeah. Can we talk about our album and then go?
Yeah, it's important to stay positive, isn't it? And things will come back. We will dance again, and we will go out and see bands. And we just got to keep our backs low to the wall and hunker down and ride it out, really, I think. But music can help us do that. That's the other weird paradox, is in the pandemic, music's become more important than it's ever been, in a way. And people are listening in a way they've never listened before, and that's really good for artists and musicians out there. And hopefully that will be.
In case people don't know, Youth and I have made an album together this year. So it's a solo album. It's a Brick Smith album, which Youth produced, and we co-wrote it. We wrote it together, and it'll be coming out at some point this year, probably maybe in the spring or a little bit beyond. So that's been an absolute pleasure for me to be working with you, Youth, and literally it made lockdown more than bearable. It actually was a gift, and for me, you know. So.
Well, it's a great experience for me as well. I really enjoyed making it, and the way we did it was in lockdown. With we ping-ponging between us different versions of the song, and then meeting up here in Spain and in London after the end of the summer, and just wrapping it up. And yeah, there's a fantastic way of working, and really great experience. Really great getting each other before that either. So that's been a real great journey, Brix. Thank you for that.
No, thank
really
you.
Look forward to it launched, and hopefully we do some gigs together with it, you know.
And we're still writing songs together. So you know, we would write songs for other people, and we're cooking up stuff all the time. So it's amazing to have found a musical soulmate through all of this, which has been an utter blessing. You know, it's been a really hard, difficult slog. I've had a lot of personal tragedies, which I haven't really talked about, that have happened during the pandemic. And but this has been, working with you has been a high point, and it's something that we're going to continue, I hope, for a very long time to come. So
yeah, yeah. Great.
All right. Well, we'll sign off, shall we? And I'll speak to you later.
Yeah.
You'll be sending me Roadkill.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the next song I'll be working on. Except I'm also working on Real Gone. So, oh, and you need to let me know if you need me to change the beginning of the verse in the song for me and Sue. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I haven't heard that yet. So.
No, you have. I sent it to you.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Great. Okay. Let me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm living with it. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I haven't.
It.
All right. Lovely, Brix.
All
Good
right.
to see you.
Same. See you later. Mwah.